She was the kind of girl most people walked past without noticing. Every morning, she sat on the second row of the school bus, looking out of the window as the world rushed by. Her name was Amara, a name her grandmother had given her, meaning grace and immortal. But to her classmates, she was not graceful enough, not pretty enough, and not someone they thought deserved attention. Her skin was dark and smooth, her hair tightly coiled, and her clothes were always simple, never brand name or fashionable. To her, clothes were just things to cover the body, not something to make people admire you. She was never interested in competing with the latest fashion trends that other girls followed. At school, Amara usually kept to herself. She loved reading books more than talking to people. At lunch, she often sat in a quiet corner with a sandwich wrapped in foil by her mother. While others laughed in loud groups, she opened her notebook and wrote small stories only she would read. She didn't mind silence. In fact, she found comfort in it. But to the people around her, her quietness made her an easy target. Some classmates thought silence meant weakness. They believed if someone doesn't talk back, it means they are afraid. The truth was very different. Amara was not afraid. She simply preferred peace. She had learned from her mother that arguing with bullies gave them power, and ignoring them kept her spirit stronger. But being ignored didn't stop the mean girls. They noticed her every day, the way she avoided eye contact, the way she carried old school books instead of new ones, and the way she never joined in gossip or games. To them, she was different, and to cruel hearts, different was enough reason to mock. Despite their whispers, Amara carried herself with quiet dignity. Every morning before school, she helped her younger brother get ready. She tied his shoes, packed his bag, and reminded him to smile even if the world felt heavy. She was protective of him, always walking him halfway to his class before heading to her own. Her brother looked up to her like a superhero, even if no one else could see her light. This small act of love gave her strength even when her classmates tried to take it away. Inside the classroom, she was bright and curious. She asked thoughtful questions and always finished her homework on time. Teachers noticed her effort, though they rarely spoke about it in front of the class. She was the type of student who shone quietly without raising her hand too high. But the mean girls noticed something else. They saw a girl who didn't have flashy clothes, who didn't wear makeup, and who never went to parties. To them, she was the opposite of everything they wanted to be. And instead of ignoring her, they made her into their favorite target. Amara didn't let their cruelty show on her face. When they laughed at her hair, she calmly adjusted it and walked on. When they mocked her skin, she looked down at her hands and reminded herself of the stories her grandmother used to tell, stories about warriors, queens, and leaders who shared the same skin as hers. At home, her mother reminded her, "You are beautiful because you are strong. Never forget that." These words stayed with her like invisible armor. What her classmates never knew was that Amara's life outside of school was very different from theirs. Every evening, after finishing her homework, she went to the community center where an old martial arts instructor trained kids in self-defense. At first, she had joined the classes because her mother wanted her to be safe. But soon, she fell in love with the discipline, the focus, and the way her body felt alive after every session. She learned how to block punches, how to move with speed, and how to use her strength wisely. She learned that real power wasn't about hurting people, but about protecting herself and others. Even though Amara had this hidden strength, she never bragged about it. She kept it a secret, like a treasure only she knew about. No one at school would ever imagine that the unattractive girl they teased could break boards with her fists, or move like a fighter in the ring. To them, she was invisible until they decided to make her visible in the worst way possible. Amara's story began with silence. But inside her silence was a storm. A storm that would one day shake the very people who believed she was powerless. She carried her pain quietly, but she also carried hope. She dreamed of a day when people would see her not for her looks, not for her silence, but for her strength. She dreamed of a day when her brother could grow up in a world kinder than the one she faced. And though the world only saw a quiet girl with simple clothes and tired eyes, Amara knew something they did not. She was far more than what they could see. They always entered the school like they owned it. A group of 4 girls walking side by side in the hallway as if it was their stage, their shoes clicking on the tiles like applause. Everyone noticed them. Their laughter was loud, their voices sharp, and their presence impossible to ignore. They had perfect hair, perfectly painted nails, and smiles that could turn into smirks in a second. Teachers liked them because they were charming when they wanted to be. But students feared them because they could turn cruel without warning. They were the kind of girls people called popular. Though popularity was built more on fear than on love, Amara had noticed them long before they noticed her. She saw how they treated others, snickering at a boy's cheap sneakers, rolling their eyes at a shy girl who stuttered, or whispering cruel jokes about anyone who didn't fit their circle. They had a way of making people feel small, while they walked away bigger. For a long time, Amara stayed invisible to them. She kept her head down, avoided their eyes, and chose the quietest corners of the school to sit in. She thought if she stayed in her shadow, they would never bother with her. But shadows don't last forever. It happened one Monday morning. Amara was walking to her locker, carrying her books the way she always did, close to her chest, careful not to bump into anyone. She heard laughter behind her, sharp, high-pitched, echoing down the hall. One of the girls, the leader of the group, whispered just loud enough for the others to hear, "Who even dresses like that? Looked like she walked out of a thrift store." Another girl joined in. "No thrift stores have better stuff." Their giggles filled the hallway, bouncing off the walls, landing directly on Amara's back. At first, Amara didn't react. She kept her face calm, the way she always practiced at home in the mirror. Don't let them see you hurt. Don't give them power. But then, the leader, her name was Crystal, stepped closer. Crystal had long blonde hair, shiny lip gloss, and eyes that sparkled when she was cruel. She leaned in just enough and said, "Hey, aren't you tired of being you?" Her friends laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking inside Amara's chest. From that moment, Amara was no longer invisible to them. She became their daily amusement, their chosen target. Every day, they found something new to tease. One day, it was her hair. Another day, it was her skin. Sometimes, it was the way she spoke, or the way her clothes didn't match the expensive styles they wore. They invented names for her, names that stuck to her like unwanted labels. They didn't care who heard them, because making her smaller made them feel bigger. The strange thing about cruelty is how it spreads. Soon, other students who weren't even part of the group began to laugh along. They didn't want to be next, so they joined the bullies by being silent, or worse, by smiling at the jokes. Amara felt the weight of the school's eyes on her every time she walked down the hallway. She tried to pretend she didn't hear, but pretending doesn't make the pain disappear. Inside, she was carrying bruises that no one could see. Still, Amara kept her routine. She sat in her quiet corner during lunch. She wrote in her notebook, and she focused on her studies. But now, the mean girls began to seek her out on purpose. They didn't like that she ignored them. Bullies thrive on reactions, and her calm silence was like a challenge to them. So they pushed harder. They whispered as she walked by. They laughed louder when she entered the room, and sometimes they accidentally knocked her books out of her hands, just to watch her bend down and pick them up. Crystal was always the worst. She had a way of speaking that made insults sound like jokes, so even teachers didn't always notice. She would say things like, "Oh my God, you're so brave coming to school looking like that," and everyone around would laugh. To the outside world, it sounded like a joke. But Amara knew better. Every word was chosen to cut deep, to remind her she didn't belong in their world of glitter and gloss. Amara's brother, who was younger but sharp, noticed the change in her. At home, she tried to act normal, but he saw the way she stared at her reflection longer than before. He saw the way she sighed when she thought no one was listening. But even then, Amara didn't complain. She didn't tell her mother. She didn't tell her teachers. She believed she could handle it. She believed if she stayed strong, it would all pass. What no one knew was that every insult, every laugh, and every cruel glance was being stored deep inside her. Like drops of water filling a jar, her patience was being tested. And though she kept her calm mask on the outside, inside, the jar was close to spilling over. The mean girls thought they were breaking her, but what they were really doing was building a fire they couldn't control. For now, though, Amara endured. She walked past them with her chin high, even if her heart was heavy. She listened to their laughter, even as it echoed in her ears long after the school day ended. The mean girls had appeared, and with them, a new chapter of her life had begun. A chapter that would test her strength in ways no one at school could ever imagine. Asterisk. The bullying did not stay a one-time event. Once the mean girls found their target, they turned it into a routine as natural to them as checking their phones or applying lip gloss. Every single day, they found new ways to remind Amara that she was different, that she was not welcome in their world. It wasn't one big attack. It was many small cuts, again and again, until the wounds ran deep. It started in the hallways. When Amara walked with her books clutched to her chest, they would whisper just loud enough for her to hear. "There goes the charity case." She probably doesn't even own a mirror. Their whispers carried through the air like smoke, choking her peace. Sometimes they would pretend to compliment her in sarcastic voices. "Oh wow, nice shirt. Where'd you get it?" "The trash can?" Before bursting into laughter. Each word was designed to sting, and though Amara trained herself not to react, the words clung to her like shadows. At lunch, the torment grew louder. Amara preferred sitting in the far corner of the cafeteria with her simple sandwich and a bottle of water her mother packed for her. She liked being alone, scribbling in her notebook while everyone else chatted. But the mean girls made sure even that small piece was stolen. They would walk past her table, pretending to accidentally drop food near her, sometimes spilling juice close enough to splash her shoes. One time, Crystal leaned over her shoulder, pretending to admire her notebook, and then announced loudly, "Oh my God, she writes fairy tales about herself because nobody else would." Laughter followed like a cruel chorus. Even in class, they found ways to keep the torment alive. When Amara raised her hand to answer a question, one of the girls would mutter, "Teacher's pet," under her breath, loud enough for a few to hear. When she walked to the front to hand in her homework, they would giggle and make faces behind her back. It was never loud enough for the teachers to punish, but always sharp enough for Amara to feel the cut. She tried to focus on her work, tried to remind herself of her mother's words that silence is strength. But every insult became another weight pressing down on her chest. There were moments when the cruelty went beyond words. Once, as she opened her locker, she found a note taped inside. It said, "Ugly forever," in red marker. Another time, her books were knocked from her arms, scattering across the hallway as students stepped around them. No one bent to help. Most pretended not to notice, afraid that if they stood by her, they might become the next target. That loneliness was worse than the insults themselves. It told her that in a building filled with hundreds of students, she was completely on her own. Amara, however, refused to let them see her break. She picked up her books quietly, straightened her back, and walked on. Every night, when she returned, Home, she carried her pain into her room like a heavy backpack. She closed the door, sat at her desk, and poured her feelings into her notebook. Page after page filled with words she couldn't say out loud. Stories of girls who were underestimated, but later revealed their strength. Characters who looked like her, dark-skinned and strong, who rose against the voices that tried to silence them. Writing became her secret therapy, the way she stitched her broken pieces together. Still, the daily torment left scars. She began to question herself in front of the mirror. Was she truly as ugly as they said? Was she really so worthless? She tugged at her hair, smoothed her clothes, tried to imagine what it would feel like to be one of them, confident, admired, untouchable. But then she would hear her mother's voice in her memory. "You are beautiful because you are strong." Those words were her anchor, pulling her back when the storm inside threatened to drown her. Amara's little brother also became her silent supporter. Sometimes he would slip small notes into her bag, with words like "You're the best sister," or "You're my hero." Those notes, written in shaky handwriting, meant more than any compliment from the world. They reminded her that even if the school tried to break her, she was still someone's role model, still someone's safe place. But the mean girls didn't stop. They escalated. They wanted to see her cry, to see her snap, to prove that she was weak. Crystal especially hated Amara's calmness. "Why doesn't she ever fight back?" she complained one afternoon to her friends. "It's like she thinks she's better than us." And so, their cruelty became a daily performance. Each insult sharper than the last, each laugh louder. What they didn't know was that every act of torment was fueling something inside Amara. Every insult was making her stronger. Every shove was building her resilience. Beneath her quiet exterior, she was storing up all the pain, all the fire, waiting for the moment when she could release it. The mean girls thought they were winning, thought they were breaking her down. But in truth, they were creating the very strength that would one day rise against them. For now, though, Amara endured. She walked through each day like a soldier marching through a battlefield, her head held high, her heart heavy, but her spirit unbroken. The daily torment was her reality, but it was also shaping her destiny. The bullies didn't know it yet, but they were writing the very story that would one day defeat them. Most people at school only saw Amara as the quiet girl, the one who kept her head down and avoided conflict. They thought her silence was weakness, and her calmness was fear. But what they did not know was that outside of those school walls, Amara lived a very different life. Beneath her quiet personality was a strength she carefully guarded. A strength that was slowly shaping her into someone far more powerful than her bullies could ever imagine. It began years earlier, when Amara was only 10. Her mother, a hard-working woman who carried wisdom in her eyes, worried about her daughter's safety. Their neighborhood wasn't always safe, and her mother wanted her to grow up strong, not just physically, but mentally. One evening, her mother took her by the hand and led her to a small community center at the edge of town. Inside, there was no glamour, no shine, just a wide wooden floor, punching bags lined against the walls, and an old instructor who moved with surprising speed for his age. His name was Mr. Daniels, a retired martial artist who now dedicated his time to teaching kids self-defense. Amara had been shy at first. She stood at the back of the class, her arms crossed, watching other kids kick, punch, and shout with energy. She thought she didn't belong there. But Mr. Daniels had seen something in her. He approached her quietly, handed her a pair of worn-out gloves, and said, "Strength isn't about how loud you are. It's about how steady you can stand when the world pushes you. I think you're stronger than you know." Those words planted a seed inside her heart. From that day on, Amara became a regular student. Every evening after finishing her homework, she walked to the community center. At first, her movements were clumsy, her punches weak, her balance shaky. But she didn't give up. She practiced again and again, repeating the same drills until her muscles began to remember what her mind had learned. Her body grew faster, her punches sharper, her kicks stronger. More than her body, though, her spirit began to change. She learned discipline, focus, and patience. She learned that true fighters don't seek fights, they seek peace. Years of training built a secret side of Amara that no one at school ever saw. While the mean girls laughed at her in the hallways, she was learning how to break boards with a single strike. While they mocked her appearance, she was practicing stances that rooted her like a tree, unshakable and firm. While they spread rumors, she was sparring with opponents twice her size, learning how to stay calm under pressure. Her evenings at the community center were the opposite of her days at school. There, she was not the unattractive girl. She was a student, a fighter, someone respected for her effort. The other kids admired her dedication, and Mr. Daniels often used her as an example of quiet strength. "See Amara," he would say, to the class, "she doesn't need to be loud. She doesn't need to show off. Her strength speaks for itself." And every time he said that, a spark of pride lit up inside her chest. At home, her younger brother sometimes begged her to show him a few moves. She would laugh softly, guiding his small hands into a fist, teaching him how to stand with his feet. Apart from balance, she never used her skills to scare him, only to remind him that strength was about protection. One day, she whispered to him, "If someone tries to push you down, you'll know how to stand tall." He grinned at her, as though she were a superhero. In his eyes, she was. But Amara never told anyone at school about this side of her. She didn't brag about her training. She didn't boast about her strength. She kept it hidden, like a powerful secret only she could hold. She believed there was no need to reveal it not, unless the day came when she had no other choice, to. The outside world, she remained the quiet girl with second-hand clothes and a notebook full of scribbles. But inside, she was a fighter in every sense of the word. And yet, the torment she faced every day at school made her training more meaningful. Every insult became fuel for her punches. Every cruel laugh became energy for her kicks. Every shove in the hallway reminded her why she needed to be strong, not to hurt others, but to never let them destroy her spirit. What the mean girls didn't know was that each time they mocked her, they were only sharpening her resolve. They thought they were breaking her down, but in truth, they were building her into someone who could never be broken. One evening, after a particularly harsh day at school, Amara stayed late at the community center. Sweat dripped from her forehead. As she struck the heavy bag again and again, punch louder than the last, Mr. Daniels watched her silently, then finally said, "You've got fire in you. Amara, one day the world is going to see it. Don't waste it on anger. Use it when it matters." She nodded, her chest heaving, her fists burning. And for the first time in a long while, she felt powerful again. That hidden strength became her anchor. It was the reason she could walk into school every morning without breaking. It was a reason she could hold her head high, even as laughter followed her down the hall. She knew something the bullies didn't know. She was not fragile. She was not weak, and when the time came, she could stand her ground like no one else. For now. She kept her secret safe, buried deep beneath her silence. But life has a way of pushing people to their limits. And soon, the bullies would push her too far, forcing her to reveal the side of herself they were least prepared to see. The side of her that was a fighter. Asterisk, the breaking point never comes in one moment. It builds slowly, like rain filling up glass at first. It drips in quietly, an insult here, a laugh there, a cruel whisper that slides into your ears. But drop after drop, the glass fills. And when it spills over, it is no longer gentle. For Amara, that day came on a gray afternoon in the school cafeteria. It was a Wednesday, the middle of the week, when everyone's energy was low, and the cafeteria buzzed with the usual noise of clattering trays and overlapping conversations. Amara carried her lunch, just a sandwich and an apple, walking carefully toward her usual corner table. She had almost made it when she heard the voices. Those voices. Crystal and her friends were gathered at a table near the center, laughing as always. Their table was full of attention, surrounded by students who admired them or feared them enough to stay close. As Amara walked past, Crystal's eyes lit up with mischief. She whispered something to the girl beside her, and they both burst into laughter. Then Crystal called out loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "Hey, Amara, why don't you come sit with us? Oh wait, we don't have a seat for charity cases." The table erupted with laughter. Amara froze for a second, her fingers tightening on her tray. She wanted to keep walking, to pretend she didn't hear. But before she could, one of the girls reached out her foot and tipped the edge of her tray. In a flash, her sandwich slid off, her apple rolled across the floor, and her water spilled. Soaking into her shoes, the cafeteria went silent for a moment, then exploded with laughter. The sound was sharp, cruel, and endless. Amara bent down quickly, trying to gather her food, but Crystal's voice rose above the noise. "Careful. Don't get your cheap clothes wet." Oh wait, too late. For the first time, Amara looked up. At them, really looked. Her eyes locked on Crystal's, steady and unblinking. Something inside her chest shifted. She had taken every insult, every shove, every whisper. She had written her pain in secret notebooks, hidden her tears behind locked doors, and poured her frustration into the heavy bag at the community center. But in that moment, with laughter surrounding her like a storm, something inside her snapped. She stood up slowly, the cafeteria watching in silence now. Her soaked shoes squished against the floor, but her steps were steady. She walked toward Crystal's table, each movement calm but heavy with power. The laughter faltered, replaced by murmurs. Nobody had ever seen Amara approach the mean girls before. She was supposed to stay in her corner, to stay quiet. But now, she was breaking that unspoken rule. Crystal smirked, though her eyes flickered with a hint of unease. "What's the matter? Gonna cry?" she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Amara didn't answer. Instead, she placed her hands on the edge of their table and leaned in slightly. Her voice, when it came, was low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "You think I'm weak because I don't fight back, but you don't know me. You don't know what I can do." A ripple went through the crowd. Students leaned closer, sensing something they had never witnessed before. Crystal rolled her eyes, trying to regain control. "Oh, please. What are you gonna do? Write about us in your little notebook?" Amara straightened, her shoulders squared, her gaze unshakable. For the first time, the cafeteria saw her not as the quiet girl, not as the target, but as someone standing tall, unafraid. She didn't shout, she didn't insult, back her silence spoke louder than any words could. The energy shifted. Crystal's smirk faltered. Then one of Crystal's friends, eager to keep the laughter alive, muttered, "Why don't you just sit down before you embarrass yourself?" That was at the last drop in the glass. Amara's hand slammed down on the table, not in violence, but with enough force to make trays jump and drinks spill. The sound echoed through the cafeteria like thunder. Gasps filled the room. And in that single action, everyone realized she was done being their victim. The bullies had wanted a reaction, but not this one. Not this calm, powerful defiance that made the air feel heavy. Crystal leaned back slightly, her confidence shaken. For the first time, she saw something in Amara's eyes she had never seen before: fire. Amara didn't stay long. She didn't need to. She simply turned and walked away, her head high, her steps steady. The cafeteria remained silent, all eyes following her as she left. No one laughed now. No one whispered. That day was the breaking point, not because Amara had fought them physically, but because she had finally let them see the strength she carried inside. It wasn't loud, it wasn't messy, but it was powerful. And though the mean girls didn't know it yet, it awakened something they could no longer control. From that moment forward, the story was no longer just about bullying. It was about what happens when the underestimated refuse to stay silent. It was the beginning of a shift. It's a turning point that would change everything in the days to come. The cafeteria incident was only the beginning. Though Amara had walked away that day without throwing a single punch, the silence she left behind was heavier than any fight. For the first time, the mean girls had seen something in her they did not understand. But rather than stop, they decided to push harder. Bullies thrive on control, and Amara's defiance threatened their power. Crystal especially felt her pride wounded. She couldn't let it go. 2 days later, the tension reached its peak. It was Friday, and the air was buzzing with weekend excitement. Students filled the halls, chatting about parties, movies, and plans. Amara carried her books as usual, her face calm, but her heart steady with the fire that had been growing inside her. She knew something was coming. She could feel it in the stares, in the way the mean girls whispered more than usual, in the way people glanced at her, then quickly looked away. When lunchtime came, Amara once again sat in her corner. She unwrapped her sandwich, opened her notebook, and tried to ignore the whispers. But the mean girls weren't going to let her eat in peace. Crystal stood up from her table, her friends following like shadows, and made her way across the cafeteria. The room seemed too quiet as they approached. Everyone knew something was about to happen. Still writing fairy tales. Crystal sneered. Grabbing the notebook from Amara's table, she flipped through the pages, pretending to read. Wow, you even give yourself happy endings in these little stories. That's cute. Too bad real life isn't like that. She tossed the notebook. Onto the floor, something inside Amara stirred, but she remained calm. She bent down, picked up her notebook, and placed it gently back on the table. Her silence only made Crystal angrier. She wanted a reaction. She wanted to see Amara break. Why don't you fight back? One of the girls mocked. What are you too scared? Amara looked up slowly, her eyes meeting Crystal's. No, she said simply. I'm not scared. The words were soft, but they carried through the cafeteria like a strike. Murmurs rose. No one expected her to answer, let alone so calmly. Crystal smirked, masking the flicker of doubt in her eyes. Oh really? Prove it. She shoved Amara's tray onto the floor, food scattering everywhere. Gasps filled the room. Everyone was watching now. Amara's heart pounded, but her body felt steady, rooted like the stances she had practiced at the community center. This was at the moment when everything inside her, all the years of silence, all the training, all the fire, could no longer stay hidden. Crystal pushed again, this time harder, trying to knock Amara off balance. Her ground. Her body moved without hesitation, without fear. She caught Crystal's wrist in one swift motion, twisting it just enough to make her gasp, but not enough to hurt her. The cafeteria went silent. Crystal froze, her confidence slipping away. Amara's eyes locked on hers, calm and steady. Don't touch me again, she said, her voice firm, unshakable. The unexpected turn shocked everyone. No one had ever seen Amara fight back. No one had believed she could. But here she was, holding the leader of the mean girls in place with a strength that came not from anger, but from control. She wasn't wild, she wasn't reckless, she was precise, calm, and powerful. Crystal tried to pull away, but Amara released her first, letting her stumble back. The message was clear. She had chosen to let go, Not because she was weak, but because she was in control. That choice to control was what truly silenced the room. The other girls looked uneasy now. They'd always followed Crystal's lead, but seeing her falter broke their confidence. Whispers spread quickly across the cafeteria. "Did you see that?" She stopped her like it was nothing. "I didn't know she could do that." Crystal, embarrassed and furious, tried to cover her fear with laughter. "Wow, what are you? Some kind of ninja?" She scoffed, though her voice trembled slightly. But the laughter she expected from her friends didn't come. They were quiet, still processing what they had just witnessed. Amara bent down, picked up her fallen tray, and calmly set it on the table. She didn't shout. She didn't gloat. She simply sat down again, opened her notebook, and began to write as though nothing had happened. Her calmness in victory was more powerful than any angry outburst could have been. The cafeteria buzzed with whispers now, but the laughter was gone. Crystal and her friends walked back to their table, their heads high, but their confidence cracked. They had expected tears, humiliation, or at least fear. Instead, they had been met with strength they could not understand. Strength that did not need to prove itself through shouting or violence. For Amara, it was the unexpected turn she had never planned for, but had always been ready for. She had revealed just enough of her hidden strength to show the world she was not weak, not fragile, not their victim. She had drawn a line, and everyone knew it. That moment changed everything. The bullies no longer looked untouchable. The students who once laughed along now looked at Amara with new eyes. Some with respect, some with guilt, but none with the same cruel laughter as before. The balance had shifted. Amara closed her notebook, her heart still pounding, but her spirit calm. She knew this was only the beginning. The fight was not over, but the world had finally seen her for who she really was, a fighter. Not because she loved to fight, but because she refused to be broken. The cafeteria incident spread through the school like wildfire. By the end of the day, everyone was whispering about it. Amara, the quiet girl, the girl they used to call ugly and weak, had stood up to Crystal, the queen bee of the school, and stopped her with a single, calm move. It wasn't just that she had defended herself, it was how she did it. There had been no screaming, no chaos, no wild fight. Amara had shown strength in silence, control in calmness. That was what unsettled everyone the most. On the bus ride home, she could feel the eyes of her classmates on her. People who had never spoken to her before were sneaking glances, whispering behind their hands. Some of them looked curious, others guilty. A few even looked impressed. For the first time, Amara wasn't invisible anymore. She was no longer the girl they walked past without a second thought. She had become someone impossible to ignore. The mean girls, however, were not used to being silenced. Crystal tried to laugh it off, pretending nothing had happened. She told her friends that Amara got lucky and that it wasn't a big deal. But her laughter didn't sound the same. It didn't have the same sharpness, the same confidence. There was a crack in her voice, one she couldn't hide, and the other girls noticed. For the first time, their leader had been shaken, and it made them uncertain. The next day at school, the atmosphere had changed. When Amara walked down the hallway, the usual whispers weren't filled with insults. Instead, they were filled with curiosity. Students nudged each other as she passed, their voices low, but their eyes wide. That's her. She stood up to Crystal. She didn't even flinch. Amara heard them, but she didn't let it show. She walked as she always did, calm and steady, her books pressed to her chest. Inside, though, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a quiet sense of pride. In class, the shift continued. No one mocked her when she raised her hand. No one snickered when she walked to the front. The same students who used to laugh at her now avoided making eye contact, unsure how to act around her. Some even looked at her with respect, though they didn't say it out loud. Respect wasn't something Amara had ever chased, but now it followed her like a shadow. Crystal, however, couldn't stand the change. She tried to regain her power, tossing insults, as she always did, but the words didn't land the same way. Anymore, the cafeteria had changed the script. Everyone had seen her falter, and no amount of jokes could erase that memory. When Crystal sneered at Amara's clothes the next day, no one laughed. Instead, there was an awkward silence, and a few students even rolled their eyes. The power she once held so easily was slipping away. And it was all because of the girl she had underestimated. For Amara, the shock of the school's reaction was overwhelming. She had spent years being ignored, ridiculed, and mocked. People looked at her differently. They gave her space in the hallways. They whispered about her strength. Some even smiled at her, small, tentative smiles of recognition. It wasn't popularity, Ara didn't want that, but it was respect. And respect was far more powerful than popularity could ever be. At home, her younger brother noticed the difference too. "Everyone at school is talking about you," he said, his eyes wide with excitement. "They say you're a fighter. They say Crystal's scared of you now." Amara laughed softly, ruffling his hair. "I don't want anyone to be scared of me," she said. "I just want them to stop being cruel." But inside, she knew her brother was right. Crystal was scared not of her fists, but of her strength. It's the kind of strength that couldn't be broken with words. Mr. Daniels, her instructor at the community center, noticed the fire in her eyes when she trained that week. Something changed. "In you," he said, watching as she landed precise, powerful strikes on the bag. "The world finally saw what I've known all along. But remember, real strength isn't about proving yourself. It's about knowing when to stand tall and when to walk away." Amara nodded, his words sinking deep. The respect she was beginning to receive didn't erase the pain of the past. It transformed it. The whispers of ugly and weak that had once cut her down no longer held power. She had faced her tormentors and shown them a side of herself they never expected. And now, the very people who had laughed at her were looking at her with awe. Still, Amara didn't let it change who she was. She didn't seek revenge, didn't walk around with arrogance, didn't try to humiliate Crystal in return. Instead, she stayed the same calm, steady, quiet. But now, her silence carried weight. Now, when she walked into a room, people noticed. They didn't laugh, they didn't mock. They watched. The shock of seeing Amara's strength turned into a kind of respect, not just from her classmates, but from herself as well. For the first time, she began to truly believe the words her mother had always told her. "You are beautiful because you are strong." She carried those words with pride, no longer doubting them. The mean girls had tried to break her. Instead, they had revealed her. And now, the school that once ignored her could not look away.